Did you know that not that long ago an American rock band died in a plane crash? It sounds like something out of a movie, but this was all too real. If you don't know of the band named Lynyrd Skynyrd, I'm sure you have heard the classic rock song Sweet Home Alabama. Well, that was their song. Lynyrd Skynyrd is an iconic Southern American rock band best known for their classic songs Freebird, Simple Man, Gimme 3 Steps, and Sweet Home Alabama. Throughout the band's music career, they sold more than 28 million records in the United States and became a cultural icon and inspiration to many generations of fans across multiple decades. Their legendary songs and performances even earned them an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on March 13, 2006. On October 20th, 1977, the Lynyrd Skynyrd band members faced tragedy early in their careers after they were on board a charter plane that crashed in the woods in Mississippi, resulting in the death of 3 band members and several others on board. The band members disbanded Lynyrd Skynyrd after the crash because they felt they could not go on anymore without those who died. 10 years later, in 1987, 5 of the surviving band members put the band back together and continued the legacy of Lynyrd Skynyrd for new generations to enjoy. Lynyrd Skynyrd's origins date back to the summer of 1964. It was the time when 3 teenagers named Gary Rossington, Bob Burns, and Ronnie Van Zant met on the minor league baseball fields of Jacksonville, Florida. Although they did not have a future in baseball, the 3 loved playing music together in the afternoons over at Bob's house. Ronnie was the vocalist, Gary was the guitar player, and Bob was on drums. They played music for fun at first, but it did not take them long to realize that they had unique skills as musicians. So, the 3 invited 2 more people to join their band, Larry Junstrom on bass and Alan Collins on guitar. They began their professional music endeavors by playing in clubs and events around Jacksonville. Lynyrd Skynyrd was not their original band name. They tried out a variety of different band names at the beginning of their career, including My Backyard, the Nobile 5, and the 1%. But those names were often met with mockery by audiences who insulted them with nicknames like 1% Talent. In 1969, the band members decided to come up with a new name that sounded interesting and strong. They eventually settled on the name Lynyrd Skynyrd, inspired by a character from the Alan Sherman song Hello Mutta, Hello Fatta, and a gym teacher named Lynyrd Skynyrd from their old high school. They changed the spelling to Lynyrd Skynyrd to give it more originality. It would go on to be their official band name from that point forward. Lynyrd Skynyrd gained positive attention from audiences starting in 1970. They went from headlining local concerts to opening for other nationally recognized bands. Their big break came in 1972 after another musician and producer named Al Kooper discovered them and signed them up for a record label and album deal. Lynyrd Skynyrd's debut album sold more than 1 million copies nationwide under the MCA Records label and ranked number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. On December 18, 1974, the album received a gold certification for its high number of sales. The band members were now officially rock stars. Lynyrd Skynyrd had its greatest success over the next 3 years. Their fan base grew exponentially due to all the hit songs they recorded and performed live, especially their single hit classic, Sweet Home Alabama. Behind the scenes, it was less glamorous since some of the band members had personal struggles with drugs and mental health issues. Bob ended up suffering a nervous breakdown while on tour in Europe, so the band replaced him with Thomas Delmer Artemis Pyle. It was October 19, 1977. By that point, Lynyrd Skynyrd's band members had grown to include Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, Gary Rossington, Alan Collins, Artemis Pyle, Leon Wilkeson, Billy Powell, and Leslie Hawkins. They were on a national tour performing the hit singles from their newest album, Street Survivors, which had been released only 2 days prior on October 17th. In Greenville, South Carolina, Lynyrd Skynyrd gave a sold-out performance at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium on October 19th. Their next tour destination was to be at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. On October 20th, the band members and additional crew members got on board a Convair CV-240 airplane to take them to Baton Rouge. Everything about the flight seemed normal at first. None of the pilots were drunk, and nobody noticed any mechanical problems with the plane. But when the plane got closer to its destination, it was suddenly running out of fuel without any logical reason. The pilots thought the aircraft had plenty of fuel when they took off from Greenville, so this was a shock to them and everyone on board. The plane was flying over a wooded swampland area of Amite County, Mississippi, which was about 5 miles away from the city of Galesburg. Once the pilots realized their fuel supply was drastically low, they made a quick decision to head to Macomb Airport in Pike County, Mississippi. A few minutes later, they realized the plane was not going to make it to Macomb Airport, which was around 10 miles from their current location in Amite County. The only choice left for the pilots was to find an open field amid the wooded swampland and make an emergency landing. The pilots spotted a viable open field in the distance for landing the plane, but it was too late because the plane now had an empty fuel tank, causing the plane to drop altitude rather quickly. The pilots did everything they could to keep the plane above the massive line of trees below them as they attempted to fly the aircraft toward the open field only hundreds of yards away. Unfortunately, their efforts failed. The plane was so low that it brushed over the top of the trees for about 100 yards straight until it crashed into a large tree. The surviving passengers recalled the sounds they heard as the plane hit the top of the trees. One of the survivors, Gary Rossington, compared the sounds to hundreds of baseball bats striking the body of the aircraft at the same time. The sounds kept getting louder until the crash finally occurred, knocking out Rossington and the other passengers. The crash decimated both the tree and the plane. 3 band members died on the flight: Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, and Cassie Gaines. Other casualties included the 2 pilots and the band's road manager, Dean Kilpatrick. As for the rest of the band members, they survived the crash but suffered severe injuries. Experts believe the surviving members escaped death because they were seated in the rear of the plane, whereas the killed members were sitting closer to the front. Based on evidence from the crash site, the front of the plane broke apart and bore the worst of the impact. One of the killed members, Ronnie, got thrown out of his seat and landed headfirst onto a tree, killing him instantly. He apparently had not worn his seatbelt. To make matters worse, police and ambulances had trouble getting to the plane crash site due to its remote location. The crash site was so deep into the wooded swampland and overgrown forest that responders' vehicles kept getting stuck in the muddy and watery terrain of a nearly 3-foot-deep creek. By the time the responders got to the crash site and tended to the survivors, they had to call upon residents to assist in transporting them to the hospital because they couldn't dig out their emergency vehicles in time. The good news was that many of the residents in the area drove pickup trucks capable of moving through the rough terrain. So they loaded the wounded band members and other survivors onto the backs of their pickup trucks and drove them to different hospitals. The surviving band members suffered several injuries ranging from punctured lungs and facial lacerations to broken arms, legs, ribs, and neck. None of the survivors had any idea that some of their fellow band members had died. They didn't find out about the deaths until several days later as they were recovering at separate hospitals. Once they learned the terrible news, it invoked sadness in the survivors that would never go away. According to surviving band member Artemis Pyle, the Convair CV-240 was an older plane model for that time and was known to have a malfunctioning fuel gauge. That would explain why the pilots thought they still had enough fuel in the plane when they really didn't have any. Pyle even said the initial appearance of the CV-240 made him believe it was something out of the Beverly Hillbillies, a criticism that referenced an old television show. The entire incident was a tragedy on so many levels. Lynyrd Skynyrd had reached the peak of its popularity before the crash and had the potential to peak even higher. But the band didn't know how to carry forward after the crash. Between the trauma of their injuries and losing 3 band members, the surviving members made the difficult and heartbreaking decision to disband Lynyrd Skynyrd in 1977. Fans of Lynyrd Skynyrd throughout the United States were in disbelief over what happened. They had grown to love the band during the 4 short years of fame it had. The death of the founding band member and lead vocalist, Ronnie Van Zant, affected fans and the surviving band members the hardest. His death was a significant factor in why the survivors decided to disband Lynyrd Skynyrd. All the public had left of Lynyrd Skynyrd were the 5 albums they had recorded up until that point. Anytime someone heard Lynyrd Skynyrd songs like Sweet Home Alabama or Freebird, they would think about the band members who died in the plane crash. The crash site even became a tourist attraction, where fans from across the country would come to lay flowers and pay their respects. Ronnie Van Zant joined the ranks of several legendary musicians and singers who died young, such as Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Buddy Holly, Jim Morrison, and Jimi Hendrix. Fans cannot help but think about him whenever they hear recordings of his powerful and unique voice. Lynyrd Skynyrd remained disbanded for the next 10 years. Fans never forgot about the band and continued to buy copies of their albums and songs. In fact, their last album before the crash, Street Survivors, ended up becoming a platinum album after the crash and ranked number 5 on the Billboard 200. It was the highest rank the band had ever gotten on the Billboard charts. The surviving members of Lynyrd Skynyrd revived the band in 1987, with Ronnie's younger brother, Johnny Van Zant, replacing him as the lead vocalist. The initial plan was to do a one-time tour and album with the original surviving members and new band members. It was a tribute tour dedicated to those lost in the plane crash. The tour was called Southern by the Grace of God, Lynyrd Skynyrd Tribute Tour 1987. The popularity of the tribute tour inspired the band members to keep Lynyrd Skynyrd alive. Between 1987 and 2013, the band went on numerous tours and recorded new songs and albums. They also had to replace several members over those years due to health issues and deaths. The longest-lasting original band member was Gary Rossington, who died on March 5, 2023. As a result, all the founding members of Lynyrd Skynyrd are now dead. The remaining band members have stated they will continue to tour and keep the music of Lynyrd Skynyrd alive for new and old generations to enjoy. Since Lynyrd Skynyrd has recorded over 60 albums throughout the 50 years of its existence, their music will live on forever. Not even the tragic plane crash incident could stop the legacy of Lynyrd Skynyrd. Always remember the words of the late Gary Rossington. We're still standing, still keeping the music going. We wanted to do the guys who aren't with us any more proud, and keep the name proud too. Thanks for watching today, and if you liked this video, consider subscribing to the channel and giving us a thumbs up. Rock on.